You ever get that feeling like something invisible is pulling the strings on your own behavior, keeping you hooked on something you just know you should probably walk away from? Well, it turns out there often is. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this unseen architect that shapes our habits, our desires, and yeah, even our relationships. Let's see what's really going on behind the scenes.
So what on earth could possibly connect the flashing lights of a casino, the emotional roller coaster of a bad romance, and that phone that's probably buzzing in your pocket right now? I mean, on the surface, they've got nothing in common, right? But as different as they seem, they are all absolute masterclasses in psychological manipulation. And they're all built on the exact same foundation.
And that's the wild part. There is a single, incredibly powerful behavioral principle at work in all of these situations. It's a blueprint so effective at commanding our attention that once you see it, I promise you are going to start recognizing it everywhere. So to really get this blueprint, we've got to go back a bit to the origins of behavioral science. We're about to dive into the science of maybe, and you are about to see exactly why getting a reward sometimes is so much more powerful than getting one always. Our story kicks off way back in 1898 with a guy named Edward Thorndike and his puzzle box cats. He figured out that any action that led to a reward got repeated. Simple enough. Okay, so fast forward a few decades to the 1930s, and B.F. Skinner builds his famous Skinner box, which gave him way more control. But here's where it gets really interesting. In the middle of the century, he had his big breakthrough. It wasn't just that you gave a reward, but how often you gave it. That was the real key. So this whole thing, Skinner gave it a name, intermittent reinforcement. You might also hear it called a variable ratio schedule. And the idea is actually pretty simple. Instead of rewarding a behavior every single time, you reward it randomly, unpredictably. The subject, whether it's a lab rat or a person, knows a reward is coming. They just have no idea when. And that little bit of uncertainty, it changes everything. And this is where you can really see the power of it. Look at a predictable reward, like your paycheck. It's effective, right? It gets you to show up to work. But if it suddenly stops coming, you stop working. Pretty straightforward. Now, an unpredictable reward, like hitting a jackpot on a slot machine, that doesn't just get the job done, it creates an obsession. The behavior becomes incredibly hard to stop because you're always thinking, okay, but maybe the next time will be the one. So why is this so powerful? Why does our brain fall for this every time? Well, to answer that, we've got to look at what's happening upstairs, inside our brains. Because it turns out, this isn't really about the reward at all. It's about the addictive, intoxicating thrill of just waiting for it. You know, we always hear dopamine called the pleasure chemical, right? Turns out, that's not the full story. As this research from eLife puts it, its main job is to signal a surprise. When something unexpected and good happens, your brain gets a hit of dopamine to basically say, whoa, pay attention, that was important. Let's figure out how to make that happen again.
The science behind this is something called reward prediction error. And all that means is it's the gap between what your brain thought was going to happen and what actually happened. So if you expect a reward and you get it, no big deal. There's no surprise, so you don't get a big dopamine hit. But if you expect nothing and suddenly get a reward, that surprise creates a huge dopamine spike, which basically burns that behavior deeper into your brain.
And you can really see what this looks like inside the brain. On one side, a reward is expected, and when it shows up, the dopamine response is pretty flat. But now, look over at the other side. When that reward is a total surprise, you see that huge spike. That's the chemical signal inside your head, literally screaming, that was amazing, do it again. Your brain is being trained in real time to chase that feeling of surprise. So here's the bottom line. We become addicted to the feeling of maybe. It's not even about the win anymore. We start to crave the anticipation, the possibility, the hope of a reward. That dopamine system is pushing us to seek out that feeling of surprise again and again and again. All right, so let's take this out of the lab and into the real world, because this blueprint gets used all over the place. And while sometimes it can be harmless, it also has a profound and often really destructive dark side. Just think about it for a second. Slot machines are the most obvious example, right? They're literally built on this principle. But what about those dating apps on your phone? The next swipe could be the one. Or online video games with their random loot drops and rewards. They all run on the exact same engine. They are, for all intents and purposes, modern-day Skinner boxes. And yeah, this even has a name in the dating world. You've probably heard of it. Breadcrumbing. It's when someone gives you just enough positive attention. A random text here, a like on your post there, just enough to keep your hope alive. It's literally intermittent reinforcement in a relationship, giving you just enough of a tiny dopamine hit to keep you emotionally on the hook. And, breadcrumbing, it's frustrating, it's emotionally draining, but this is where the same pattern takes a much, much darker turn. This same psychological blueprint is the foundation for something far more sinister. See, in a lot of abusive relationships, there's this really clear destructive cycle. It starts with a period of growing tension, like you're walking on eggshells. That's followed by an abusive incident. But then, and this is the key part, comes the reconciliation phase. The abuser apologizes, makes big promises, showers the victim with affection. It's a tactic called love bombing. That is the unpredictable reward. And it's followed by a period of calm, which creates this powerful illusion of hope, right before the cycle starts all over again. And this whole cycle, it creates something called a trauma bond. It's this deeply unhealthy attachment where the victim becomes psychologically tethered to their abuser. That intense, unpredictable reward of the good times, that love bombing, that calm phase, it keeps them hooked, desperately hoping that this time the calm will last forever. And look, this isn't some rare, fringe thing we're talking about. A staggering 48% of adults in the US report having experienced psychological aggression from a partner. That's nearly half. It just shows how widespread and devastating this dynamic really is. Okay, so hearing all of this, it can feel a little heavy, I get it. But the point isn't to discourage you. It's the exact opposite. It's to empower you. Because knowing this stuff, understanding this blueprint, is the first step toward taking back control. Because the second you can see that unseen architect at work, the moment you can recognize intermittent reinforcement for the psychological tool that it is, you strip it of its power. You can see the mechanism instead of just feeling that emotional pull. So how do you know if you're stuck in one of these loops? Just ask yourself a few questions. Is the communication all over the place, hot and cold? Are there tons of vague plans that just never seem to happen? Do you feel like you're on a constant roller coaster of hope and then disappointment? If you find yourself always making excuses for someone else's behavior, or you just feel confused and end up blaming yourself, that's a huge red flag. And I think this is the most important thing to walk away with. A real, healthy, genuine connection isn't built on the dizzying highs and lows of maybe. It's built on consistency, on respect, on mutual effort. It's supposed to feel secure, not like you're playing a slot machine. So, I'll leave you with this. Now that you know the blueprint, now that you can see the strings, where might this unseen architect be quietly shaping your own world? Because just recognizing it, that's the first and most powerful step you can take.